Okay, this is the last unit in Chapter 12, the last lesson in Unit 12. It puts what we've been doing the past week together. And we're going to do what we did yesterday with factoring and setting equal to 0. We're going to do that all together. Now, one of the most important things you need to realize is when you do these warm-ups, this is not set equal to 0. None of these are set equal to 0. So you don't have to solve for x. All you have to do is factor. Go ahead and pause the video, give the students time to do the warm-ups, and then play the video. Okay. So all we're going to do is factor because it's not set equal to 0. X squared plus 2x minus 3. I have my empty parentheses, my x and my x. I need two numbers that multiply to give me -3 but add up to 2. So if I have to, I know that it's 1 times -3 or -1 times 3. Because I need a positive 2, it has to be -1 plus 3. That's my answer. Now, I hope you did not multiply 2 times 24. Because if you did, you wasted your time. Because 2 can go into 2, 2 can go into 16, and 2 can go into 24, so I can factor 2 out of here. So I can divide everything here by 2. So this gives me 2 times x squared minus 8x plus 12. So now all I have to do is factor x squared minus 8x plus 12. X. Two numbers that give me positive 12 but add up to -8. That is going to be -2 minus 6. And I have to bring down my 2 on the outside. Put it right here. I think I'm glad I wasn't here to see you guys not factor the 2 out. If I wasn't sick at home before, I surely am now. Okay, there's nothing for me to factor out, so all I do is make my empty parentheses. X. Two numbers that multiply to give me 20, but add up to -9. Uh-oh. That's going to give me... Now, I know it has to be 2 negatives, because 2 positives are not going to add up to a -9. Now, I can go 120, 210, 3 doesn't go, but honestly, they got to add up to -9. So right away, I should know it's 4 times -5. -4 times -5. Add up to multiply to positive 20, add up to -9. Okay, on to today's lesson. I'm going to go ahead and put the steps out for you. There we go. Oh, it didn't release. Here we go. Here we go. Okay. Go ahead and pause the video. Give them some time to write down the steps. Okay, again, we are determining the roots. Remember, I told you yesterday, these are parabolas. Okay? Parabola is an arc. Looks something like this. The roots are where it crosses the x-axis. We're finding where the roots are by solving this equation, by factoring and solving this equation for x. Notice how this is set equal to 0. Because it's set equal to 0, not only do I have to factor, I also have to solve for x. Okay? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to factor. Two numbers that multiply to give me -8 but add up to 2. I'm going to go with positive 4 and -2. Positive 4, -2. 4 times -2 gives me -8. 4 minus 2 gives me 2. So, am I done? No, because this equals 0. So that means I now have to go x plus 4 equals 0, x minus 2 equals 0. So x equals negative 4, and x equals positive 2. Now I'm done. Okay? Remember, your x squared must be positive, and your equation must be set equal to 0. These 3 is set equal to 0, and my x squared is positive, but look at 4. 4 is not set equal to 0, so I have to set it equal to 0. How do I get this negative 4 over here and set it equal to 0? That's right, I add 4 to both sides. Now, notice how I am adding 4 to the 8. I cannot add 4 to the negative 7x because the negative 7 has an x. This has an x squared. I can only add like terms. So I get x squared minus 7x plus 12 equals 0. So this now is what I'm going to factor. I'm going to factor that right there. So I take my 2 empty parentheses. My leading coefficient is 1. Nothing can factor out. 2 numbers that multiply to give me 12, but add up to negative 7. Because I have a negative and a positive, see how I have a negative and a positive? That tells me that my 2 multiples that I have are going to both have to be negative. I have to multiply to get 12, so I can go 1 times 12. Negative 1 times negative 12. 2 times 6. Negative 2 times negative 6. This equals 13 when I add them. This equals 8 when I add it. 3. Can 3 go into 12? Yes. 3 times 4. That equals positive 7 when you add it. Negative 3 times negative 4 equals negative 7 when you add it. That's what I want right here. This is my answer. So, x minus 3, x minus 4. Now, I'm not done because it's set equal to 0. So this means x equals 3, x equals 4. Because then I went ahead and solved for x. I didn't write it out. Hopefully by now you don't have to write it out. Number 5, look at what number 5 is set equal to. It is set equal to negative 10x. So I have to get rid of that negative 10x. How do I do it? I add 10x to both sides. But look where I'm going to add it to. I'm going to add it to my x. I cannot add it to my 15 or my x squared. So this gives me x squared plus 8x plus 15 equals 0. Now my equation is set equal to 0, so now I can factor. X and x. Both, the 8 is positive and the 15 is positive, so I know that both of my numbers are going to be positive. 3 times 5 is 15, 3 plus 5 is 8, and this equals 0. So x equals 3, x equals negative 5. I'm sorry. That should be x equals negative 3, because I'll subtract 3 to get it. Okay? X equals negative 3, x equals negative 5. All right. I hope this isn't too difficult, but I know it is. Okay, so now, 6, you just add 3 to both sides. Let's look at 7. Number 7, it is set equal to 0. Is my leading coefficient 1? Right here is my leading coefficient. Is that 1? No, it is not. So the first thing I do is, is there a common number? Is there a number that I can factor out of the 2, the 17, and the 21? Will 2 go in the 17? Absolutely not. So, guess what? 2 is the only thing that goes into 2 besides 1, so there is not a number I can factor out. So now I have to multiply A times C. Remember? This is A, this is B, this is C. So I multiply A times C. 2 times 21 is 42. So now I need two numbers that multiply to give me 42, but add up to 17. Okay, let's go. 1 times 42, not going to do it. 2 times 21, not going to do it. So then I have to say, can 3 go into 42 evenly? Three goes into 42. 3 times 14 is 42. If you didn't know that, use your calculator. Okay? 3 times 14 is 42. 3 plus 14 gives you 17. So now I have my parentheses. I have A plus 3. Yes, I almost made an X. And A plus 14. Now, what do I do now? Again, I'm glad I'm not here because I know that you're like, oh, now you just solve A equals -3, A equals -14, and that is wrong, Bob. Remember, you multiply A times C, then you divide both of your multiples by A. So I have to divide the 3 by 2, and I have to divide the 14 by 2. This is what I was talking about when I said you guys will not memorize anything. And it comes back to haunt you every time. 3 over 2 is reduced. This fraction can't do anything else. So I take the denominator, I put it in front of the letter, plus 3, and 14 over 2 can reduce to 7, and I set it equal to 0. Now I solve. 2A plus 3 equals 0. A plus 7 equals 0. So over here, A equals -7. 2A equals -3. A equals -3 over 2. Okay, those are your two answers. That is completed. Every single step has to be done. Okay, number 8. There's nothing I can factor out. Yes, 4 will go into 8, but 4 won't go into 5. 6, 11, and 4, there's nothing I can factor out. Okay, now, this is simply review. Remember, you cross multiply, solve for x. So, 3 times 2 is 6. Put your equal sign right here, because each cross has to be on two different sides of the equal sign. X times x is x squared. X times -1 is -1. Okay? Now, what does this look like? I'm sorry, that's -1x. What does this look like? Well, let me see here. If I subtract 6 to both sides, I get 0 equals x squared minus 1x minus 6. Do you think I should factor this? Well, the answer is yes, you should. So now I have x squared minus 1x minus 6 equals 0. Doesn't matter if you put the 0 in front or the back, okay? So, let me see. Can I factor it? Are there two things that multiply together to give me -6 but add up to -1? Let's say -3 plus 2. -3 times 2 is -6. -3 plus 2 is -1. So that means x equals 3, x equals -2. Ha ha ha. Same thing here. You're going to cross multiply. I'm going to set it up differently this time so you can see it looks like we normally have them look. So now I'm going to put x times x, x times x, put your equal sign in the middle, x squared. X times 5 is plus 5x. Then you have 2 times negative 3, which is negative 6. Okay. This right here has to be on one side of your equal sign. The answer to that has to be on one side. The answer to this has to be on the other side of the equal sign. If you put the negative 6 here, you're going to have a hard time factoring it because it shouldn't be negative 6. What should it be? That's right, I have to add 6 to both sides to get it over here. So it's going to be x squared plus 5x plus 6 equals 0. Now I factor that. If you factor the negative 6, you're going to get the wrong answer. That 6 has to be positive. Okay. Number 12. A toy rocket is fired into the air from the ground. The function h times t equals negative 3t squared plus 27t. The function most closely represents the height of the rocket in feet after t seconds. Approximately how long is the rocket in the air? Well, in order to find that out, I have to solve for t. So, this right here is what we're going to factor. We're going to factor it, and then we're going to solve for t, and the positive one is going to be my answer. Here's how we do it. Negative 3t squared plus 27t. Is there anything I can take out of here? Yeah, I can take out a negative 3, and I can take out a t. Remember, your leading coefficient has to be positive. So if I divide both of these by negative 3t, I get this becomes positive 1, right? Negative over negative is a positive. Becomes positive 1. 1t minus 2t is 1t, so that becomes t. 27 divided by negative 3, please do that in your calculator. 27 divided by negative 3. I think you'll get negative 9, right? And then these t's cancel. But that all has to be multiplied by negative 3t. Okay? So now, we're solving. Even though this is set equal to h times t, it's really set equal to 0. Okay, so I'm going to take negative 3t, set it equal to 0, and I'm going to take t minus 9 and set it equal to 0. Divide both sides by negative 3. 0 divided by negative 3 means t equals 0. I add 9 to both sides here. T equals positive 9. That's my answer. Why is that your answer? Well, they're talking about this right here. This function represents how long the rocket was in the air. Okay? When I solve for this, these numbers are derived from some scientist who tracked the rocket in the air. That's where we got these numbers from, okay? Don't worry about where we got these numbers from. This is what we're solving. If we solve for t, we'll know how long the rocket was in the air. So we factored out a negative 3t, then we solved for every single t. Now, the rocket went in the air, so could the rocket be in the air for 0 seconds? No, that's not a possible answer. If you get negatives or 0, that's not a possible answer. T equals 9, the rocket was in the air for 9 seconds. That makes sense. That's your answer. So all you're doing is you're just doing everything that we've taught you to do with this function right here, okay? Factor out a negative 3t, solve for t. Let's look at this one. The path of a diver diving into the water is approximately parabolic. That means it's a parabola. That means him diving into the water is a parabola, okay? The function, this function, this, if you graphed it, would be a parabola, okay? Most closely represents the height of the diver in feet after t seconds. So height is h, time is t. It's how high and how long he was in the air. Approximately how long before the diver hits the water. So they don't want you to solve for h, they want you to solve for t. So this is my function. So I need to solve for t. Can I factor anything out of here? No. T is not common to all of them. However, plus 3t plus 9. However, I cannot have my leading coefficient be negative 2. How do I turn this positive? I turn it positive by multiplying it by negative 1 or dividing it by negative 1. If I divide this by negative 1, I have to divide everything by negative 1. So whenever you want to turn your leading coefficient positive, you just divide everything by negative 1. Negative over negative is a positive, so this gives me negative 1 times my negative 2t turns into a positive 2t squared because I divided it by negative 1 minus 3t minus 9. So there's a shortcut. You don't have to actually divide it by negative 1. You can just put this in parentheses, okay? Put a negative 1 out here and change all of your signs inside. Dividing it by negative 1, doing the last thing I told you to do, same thing. So now we're going to factor. This is just like we're solving for t because that's our time. This is just like when we did it before. You have to multiply a times c. I get negative 18. So now I need two things that multiply to give me negative 18 but add up to negative 3. That means one's going to be negative and one's going to be positive. 1 and 18 aren't going to work. 2 and 9 aren't going to work. Can 3 go into 18? Let's see. 18 divided by 3 equals 6. 3 and 6. Well, that sounds like it works. 3 times 6 gives you 18. The 6 has to be negative in order to add up to negative 3. So now I keep my negative 1 out here. I have t plus 3 times t minus 6. Now, what do I have to do? Do not forget the last step. Because you multiplied a times c, you now have to do what? You now have to divide by a. So this needs to be divided by 2. This needs to be divided by 2. So now I have negative 1 times 2t plus 3 times t minus 3. Am I done? No, I have to solve each function for t. Now, does this negative 1 right here, does that have a t with it? Nope. So I don't have to solve it. Does t, this has a t, this parentheses right here has a t, so I set 2t plus 3 equal to 0. And this function has a t with it, so I said t minus 3 equal to 0. So, this is t equals 3. This becomes 2t equals negative 3. T equals negative 3 over 2. Now, can the diver be in the air for negative time? No, he's not a time traveler. He cannot be in the air for negative time. That is not your answer. 3 seconds. The diver was in the air for 3 seconds. That's your answer. Okay. I know this gets confusing. Do your best. Look at your notes. If you have any questions, I will be back tomorrow to answer all your questions during the review. We're going to review for the test tomorrow. We'll be taking the test Thursday. All right, work on your homework. Do not give the sub a hard time. Have a great day, and bye-bye.